that's distracting. I can. How's that?
I can. I noticed that on the Facebook live stream, so I was like trying to back up a little bit. Oh, yeah, well, usually not sitting here indefinitely. I'm behind video occasionally.
Does this float?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is all true.
Right.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks so much for coming tonight. This is our second of our Smart series for Getting Press. And I just want to say thank you most off to our sponsors. It's why we were able to do this for free. But Burlington City Arts Center for letting us be here, to Heart Web Design, Digital Marketing, to Community Capital Vermont, 105.9 FM, the Radiator, and Big Landing Performing Arts all helped us put this together. This whole thing, Smart Artist Series, is sort of our attempt to bring artists together to learn some skills that aren't just about making art, but about getting our art out there and seen in the world. So, yeah, great. Thank you. Oh, yeah, thank you. I am Dominic Spillane. I am the founder of TheaterEngine, which is an online platform for performing arts.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Sadie. I'm the founder of the Vermont Dance Alliance. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that these three organizations all share the same passion for bridging communities and especially artists with other artists. And we're kind of secular with theater and music, so this was our effort of bridging those gaps and get all together. So if you have energy at the end, we're doing an informal serve at the Whiskey Room, which is right around the corner. And I'm going to do a shameless plug. If you have the holiday shopping, Vermont Dance Alliance has an annual fundraiser, which is live auction. So we have all these amazing art and experience gift certificates that will be auctioned off at the Light Club Lamp Shop next to Radio Beam this Friday from 7 to 10. But thanks for being here.
I am Jim Lockridge. I direct Big Heavy World, which is an all-volunteer run music archives and promotes music from Vermont. You're listening to a stream of a radio station we operate called The Radiator at 105.9 that in between the local community DJs plays local music. So thank you all for being here. Really happy to see everybody's faces and great to be a part of a community effort like this. I'm the honor of introducing our panelists tonight, so I'll dig right to that and also sort of ditto the invitation and highlight it, shine a big bright flashlight on it. The after event over at Whiskey Room, please circle up around the table and just hang out afterwards. If you care for any little bit of being still in your life, this is a very warm welcome. So our panelists tonight, we have Pamela Polston, off right here. Pamela is co-founder, co-editor, and associate publisher of Today's newspaper. In 2015, she was inducted into the New England Newspaper Hall of Fame. Pamela's experience as a performing musician, a writer, and publisher. And it's a special pleasure to introduce Pamela as a favorite boss of mine and a long-standing ally to our arts community. Next to him, Mary English, the host, interviewer, and reporter for Vermont Radio's Weekend Editions, and is a director for Vermont Edition. 2014 to 18, she hosted Art Hounds, the arts calendar segment. She's been a voiceover artist, a rock DJ, and a vegan baker entrepreneur. And on the screen up here, joining us from Oregon, is Galen, an American Emmy-nominated bilingual TV anchor, reporter, producer, a Society of Professional Journalists Award winner, and 2018 GLAAD Award nominee. He anchors the channel news at 5:30 and 11 p.m. for WCAX in Burlington. Sings. And as we all step aside and leave you to the conversation with our panelists, you'll see off to the side over here a couple cameras going. One is filming and archiving to YouTube. And if you have friends who might be into it, it's a live stream as well. The other is a Facebook live stream that will also add to Facebook. And those are on the Big Heavy World pages and channel. So if you have any needs during the event, please let me know, volume, etc. And thank you.
Well, I guess I've been elected to go first, so please let me know. Can you hear in the back? I don't know if this mic is happening, but can anybody not hear? Okay. So a couple of years ago, I was asked to be on a very similar panel to this. It was for organization of professional event planners, and that is a thing. And they wanted me to speak about how to write a good press release. And it actually is very similar to what I'm going to talk about tonight. So I sort of cribbed what I prepared then for you guys. And I see a lot of taking notes. I just want you to know that that's fine. But if you want me to email this beautiful piece of writing to you later, I can do that. We'll just have to gather your email address somehow. So this is called How to Be the Story. I just wanted to say that this to start is with acquiring a little bit of media literacy yourself. And in my opinion, the most important skill is how to actually communicate with an editor, with anybody really, but most people you don't send press releases to. If sending just a regular email or a more formal press release, there are some really important things to remember. One of them is that it should be, well, actually one of them is that editors and report are really busy people. So we get like hundreds of press releases a day. So get to the point when you write, get to the point quickly. As I like to say, don't bury the lead. Put all of your important information up at the top, and if you want to elaborate, you can do that. But please help us know, what does this person want right at the top? And it's also great if you're doing an event or you're a band or whatever your purpose is. If you have any high-res photos, please send those along right at start. If you don't know what high-res means, you can ask and we can tell you what our needs are. They're certainly different for online than they are print. But it's really important for people to have a good photo, especially if you're a performing artist. And also, if you do have an event, please also send everything to the editor as well as to the calendar, because we want to make sure that you get in the listings, and the calendar person and the editor are not the same person, at least not at 7 days. So speaking of appropriate editor, I cannot advise you strongly enough to do a little homework and find out who that person is. Who is the appropriate recipient for a press release at 7 days. I'm the editor, so that would probably be me for most of you. I think everybody here is an artist of some kind. If you're a musician, that would be our music editor, Jordan Adams. All of this info is available on our website. So please take the time to know who you're communicating with. What you should not do, because we will really be pissed, is email all of the editors and writers simultaneously but separately, because if editor responds to an email and finds out that somebody else already has, it's just kind of annoying. And so it's getting 6 identical emails forwarded to you. This happens a lot. The other thing you should find out is the best and worst times for reaching out to somebody. In the case of 7 days, we come out on Wednesday. That means space and production on Monday and Tuesday. Don't bother trying to communicate with anybody on those days, unless you have breaking news. So, another thing, and I think everybody will speak to this, but you also want to know, what does this particular media outlet do? Okay, in my case, it's print. We do have blogs and e-newsletters, so there are a lot of other options, but mostly it's a weekly print publication. You should be familiar with what kinds of things paper does cover and doesn't. Don't publish press releases, for example, and yet every single week people ask us to. You might want to be familiar with paper and all of the little ways to cover content, from a calendar spotlight to a review to a cover story if you're really lucky. And I also can't stress this enough. Please know deadlines. It's really, really a shame if you send something in too late and we get it into the paper in a manner. Because believe it or not, we actually really want to do that. So yeah, details. So I have a whole list of things not to do. Do you want to hear those? Okay. I guess I've already told you a couple of them. Do not call or email, ask if the editor got your email the other day. If you don't trust the technology, don't use it. And as again, I and all of the other editors get a lot of emails every day, so we might not remember yours. Do not open the editors in production. Do not leave interminable mails with your phone number at the very end. Don't say your phone number so quickly that it's impossible to find you, especially if it's at the very end. This is important. Do not act entitled to coverage. Do not say you're buying an ad in the paper and assume that you will get editorial coverage too. Do not rattle off all the other places where you've gotten coverage already. This is not a plus because it likes to be scooped. Yeah, one more. Do not send an email with obscure subject line and just an attachment, because it looks like spam will be deleted instantly. Okay. So again, back to be the story. I would really like people to understand what a story is, and also what it isn't. So first I would say print is not radio, is not TV, and you're lucky to all three perspectives here tonight. Each of us does some that the others don't, and we are complementary to each other. Sometimes slightly competitive with each other, but think about if your message is suited to print or radio or TV. And if it is, are there different ways that you can tell your story, or you can ask people to tell your story? Maybe you're really tender for Vermont Edition. Maybe you want to really look for a feature in 7 days. All of these things have different angles to them. And chances are you're going to be sending out the same press release to all media, but I think it's really good if you can put the time in and suggest a story angle. Simply existing is not enough. You really need to tell us, why would our readers be interested in? Tell us how to tell your story. My mic is drooping. Okay, sorry about that. I could make a really bad joke right now. I'm not going to. Okay. So, what makes a good story? What is really unusual? What is fascinating? What is funny? What is moving? What is quirky? All the things. What is surprising? Think about all those adjectives that they might apply to you. What is your story? You tell your story when you tell it to your friends. What makes it interesting? Yeah. I'm just going to move this thing over here. So yeah, remember there's a reason why we call it news media. So if there's something new, that's kind of a plus. But if you or your organization or your band or your dance company have to 10, that's kind of boring. That alone does not make a good story. And I would say that what grabs my attention as a human, as a member of this community, as an Instagram follower, might be very different from what I sit in as a journalist. So a feel-good story that I might really love in real life can be a search on the page. So try to keep those things in mind and don't be offended if they say, yeah, but what's your story? What's the angle? Because that's what we're looking for. Another thing is maybe your organization or your event is part of a large trend or is indicative of a trend. That's interesting to us too, whether it's local or national. Is yours an only in Vermont kind of story? We like those too. All of us are local media and we like to cover local stories. Of course, if you have something to offer the world has never seen or heard or tasted or smelled, that is awesome. Here are some things that other things that a story is not. Say you're a nonprofit organization and you're doing awesome works, and therefore we should write about you. Good for you. Okay, so I'm sorry to sound like a bitch, but this is what happens. Your event organization is having an anniversary. Again, that alone is not a story, but there might be something about it that makes a story. You think your band/event/organization is the greatest thing ever. Your enthusiasm is fabulous. Now tell us why our readers should care. A crowdsourcing campaign is never, ever a story. Okay. Is that clear? You know, back in the days when Kickstarter first started, it was this new thing and we wrote about it Kickstarters. And then after a while, everybody was doing a Kickstarter and we're like, I think we need to stop doing this. Seriously, the paper would be filled with them. So we just decided we're not going to cover these anymore and you're on your own, people. The irony was not lost on us that they're using this fabulous online technology, but they needed print to tell everybody know about it. I digress. Actually, that brings up something that I also wanted to ask you to never do, please, and that is to ask us to help you promote your event. Do you know what's wrong with that word?
It's not in your job description.
That is right. Not only is it not in our job description, it's kind of unethical. So a journalist is not there to promote your event. We may choose to write about you or do a story in some way, but promote is about advertising. And we try to put our wall between the two. So I have been seeing this so much more lately that people say, please help get the word out. Please help us promote our event. And I just want to say, damn it, because yeah, I'm sorry, but it's really important that you understand the difference between those two things. So let's see. Yeah, I guess the only other thing I would say is that in this current political climate, all media is kind of getting a bad rap. And I just want to get on the bandwagon. Is that the right word? Soapbox, that's it. Get on the soapbox and tell you that everybody here in this room and on that screen are working for local media companies. And we are ethical and courageous and determined to serve our communities as best we can. And there are no fake news here. So I hope that you will all honor that and feel lucky that we have so much media here. And the other side of that coin is that there are so many great artists and new artists coming up all the time, and we are really lucky to get to tell those stories. So keep pitching them. Just do it the way I told you to. I don't know if I used up my 15 minutes, but I'm going to stop now and let Mary take over.
Okay.
Do you want her to have this floppy mic? I'm just going to put her in
Where's James? Floppy mic? Is that cool? I gotta put my glasses on. And use, very, okay. Let's see, okay. First of all, thank you guys for coming out on that. This is awesome. I didn't quite know what to expect, so this is just really a warm room filled with awesome people. A lot of what Pamela has just shared is similar to what I'm going to share with you too, and maybe Galen as well, just because, you know, we're all media organization. We do have, you know, similar ways to get the artist be the story. But I'm really privileged to share just some also specific ways for Vermont radio, especially that how you can get traction for your art project, for your, you know, whatever it is you're working on, whatever media you work in, and how to the story. I think for the most part, at least for the last 8 to 10 years at VPR, we've been on this mission, and it's a never-ending mission, but we are trying to explore the whole Vermont story together. You may have heard that if you listen to VPR. It's something we say a lot. It's something we talk a lot. What does that mean? You know, what does it mean to in Vermont? What does it mean to be a Vermonter? What does it mean to be an artist in Vermont? And I think from my own perspective, you know, we've got a long way to go. We have a long way to go to be able to really hear from Vermonters, from all corners, from socioeconomic classes, from all different colors, from new Americans, from LGBTQ communities, Latinx communities. We have a long way to go. And we're really, finally, I feel like we're really open to opening our ears and really listening and being like this that I heard recently at a public radio programmers conference. They kept saying, it's not about us with us. So there are so many communities who don't listen to PR because we're not telling their stories. So we're really open right now to be able to tell every story, you know? And if that's an artist story, that's a new artist that somehow also their work intersects with other portions of a Vermont story, I think those are the ones that are going to catch the producer's eyes and ears when you write your pitch via email. That's kind of the preferred way to do it at VPR. First and foremost, because if you're sending an email to VPR, everybody sees it. And that means everybody. That means accountants in the front, to the underwriting team, to the guy that hosts the afternoon news magazine, to the events planner, to the CEO. Everyone sees every email that comes in to VPR. And our boxes are so freaking full all the time. But it's a good way because there are hundreds, just like you're saying, you see so many emails coming in every day, like, I'm an artist, I have a project, please write a story about me. For every 100 of those each day that can't actively read and get to, the accountant in the front, PR, might see it and be like, oh, did you see that email that just came in, blah. And so that way it's sort of an easier way for a lot more eyes to be on all of these emails that are coming in. And so I really appreciate that part, because a lot of the stuff, you know, we actively are reading these emails coming in, but some of them do get past us, and it's take the entire staff to sort of stay on top of those, send them to the right places. You know, they're all coming, but to sort of find all of the different departments. VPR is a media organization, statewide news organization. We also have VPR Classical, which is the state classical music signal. And we're also online. We have a really robust website, we have podcasts, we have streaming services. At the end of the day, it's a radio station, right? It's still that's you're listening to it, whether you're streaming it or it's over the air. It's radio. Radio is unique because immediate. It's sort of theater of the mind, and I think that's where, as an artist, you can really take advantage when you're pitching a story to VPR. Paint what that picture is going to be when it comes to the speakers, right? We can take beautiful photos that you sent us and high-res photos and put them on a web, and that's awesome. But at the end of the day, it's a radio story. It's a radio somebody's going to hear through monitors or speakers or streaming. You have to be able to create that world of your art, whether it's somehow pitching to us how you plan to describe your visual art or your sculpture on the radio. Does that mean maybe you write in your solicitation to us, hey, I'm doing this about working landscapes and I'm going to have sculpture out in the field, in the cornfield, and can you come to me and record the sounds and you have to sort of create that world of how do you get visual art to come across radio. And it's, it's magic, and it's when it works, it's fabulous. And those are all the really fun parts because you have to sort of think outside the box of, I'm hanging my artwork in a gallery, which is beautiful, and you can go and see it. And again, you can web post on vpr.org and see the photos, but how are you going to talk about them, or how do you want the reporter to describe them over the air? If there's some way to make it a more fuller experience for somebody who's on listening radio about your particular medium. So when you do it yourself and your art, remind us in that very short, succinct, less than 4-paragraph email, complete with great photos if they exist, and contact information. Remind us or suggest what's a neat, unique angle to make the world of your art that comes through on the radio. We may use it, we may not, but that's just a way to really start that ball rolling. Essentially, when you're sending an email to pitch yourself to be a story on VPR, you really have to get buy-in. You have to get a host or a reporter or an ear excited about, oh God, that sounds so cool. I would love to be able to go with them in their welding studio making a 9-foot out of garbage cans. I think that actually, so maybe I have a studio in X part of Vermont, and on days I'm in there and I'm, doing, create whatever it is. Just help us along. Help us get closer to that juicy center, what's going to really sound compelling on the radio or a podcast. And again, too, about the intersection of, where does art intersect with other really big issues in Vermont? I think that's been a compelling way to get more artists on the air at VPS. Like I mentioned working landscapes, or one of my favorites was a project I didn't have anything really directly to do with, but it was a fantastic listen, and I was actually a listener instead of a producer on this, and that's Writers for Recovery, who came in and did a 7-part series. They came into VPR studios and had the folks that were writing record podcast episodes. And it became this really multi-layered project at VPR. So first it was a writing project, and then it was on the airwaves, and then it became a podcast. There was a different direction to be able to access it and listen to it. From that, it had such gained a lot of momentum. A lot of listeners were listening, were commenting, were asking a lot about it. And it became a live event with a live audience that was somewhere down here downtown where the panel showed up and there was an audience, there was question and answer. Sort of think about that. Can your project sort of spill out and sort of seed other projects on VPR? Is it just a radio piece? Could it also be a podcast episode? Could it also be a live event? Could it be an event at VPR's That's in Studio One where it's we set it up like a gallery and we have people come in and see your work, but also pair it with some other cool thing that's happening in the state. Let's see, Writers for Recovery, yep. Okay, so the at VPR, as I said, VPR is the main news organization. There's also VPR Classical, Vermont Edition, a noon call-in show that's very Vermont-centric. There's a host, usually 2 or 3 subjects with live guests and questions from live callers calling in. And that's the host what they prefer on their team for hearing artists. And this is what Jane Lindholm suggested. She says, Vermont Edition always likes pitches. We appreciate concrete details as well as how the artist is connected to Vermont. That's a big thing. Generally for Vermont Edition, it has to be Vermont based. So think about that, or at least the listening. And you can send it to the whole team. Email addresses after if you'd like to. It says short is good, long not so good. More 4 paragraphs is the cutoff because you get hundreds. And here's another thing too, is that you're not always going to hear back. And don't be discouraged by that. It's just a matter of the volume of emails that they're receiving. This is where you need to think really far out, as far out as you can, especially if you have, some upcoming art project that you may not hear from them when you're pitching, but if your event is a month down the road, 2 months down the road, hear from them in that week where they're like, hey, remember that thing you sent to us 3 months ago? Can you be here at noon? Get more time than that. But essentially, it's sort of that same vibe where it's good to be, on the lookout weeks ahead and send your information. Let's see. And if you're pitching to more than one specific person at VPR, so Jane Lindholm is hosting a noontime show. Mitch Wortlieb is hosting Morning Edition. He also covers artists, authors, really any art medium. It's helpful to let them know in that initial email, whether you send them separately or send them both to the same, to Jane's address and Mitch's address. That way they're not going to step on each other's toes. It's fine if they both have the same story, but it's better if one concentrates on it and, the other show doesn't. Okay. And then I probably the last thought I'd have was, I was so privileged to be able to do that project called Art Hounds. I think it was on for about 4 years. It's something that was created at Zoda Public Radio, and we borrowed their same template, used all the same verses and everything. And really the main thrust of that, artists promoting somebody else's cool stuff. So instead of calling up and promoting yourself in your own marketing, dance event, whatever it is, you would call up and say, hey, there's a great artist or a musician that's going to be doing X. And so in that way, you're building up the community, but then they'll probably return that favor somewhere down the line, and it happened. There was never a week, this was a weekly segment, there was never a week where I was without, probably 5 or 10. It was tough to get it all in 4 minutes, I'll say that, because it was just, there was so much stuff, and people were so supportive of each other in the art community where, it was great to toot each other's horn, and they knew that eventually down the road when their project up, then friend X would be able to also promote that. So that's another thing to do. If you're reaching out to VPR, at least, you can always take that route and say, hey, this artist who's doing this thing, I just want to put it on your radar. You'll hear from this person with details or something like that. Just another way to support each other, lift each other up. That's all I got.
All right, well, this is going to be hollow. First of all, I'm really honored to be on this panel. Both Pamela and Megan, they shared some really excellent perspectives. And like they said too, when it comes to TV, a lot of it is going to be similar. We just, display it in a way. Our focus is a little bit different sometimes. I would say to understand TV, just know our workflow is kind of important. As what was said earlier, if you know what we do, it's easier for you to pitch a story that will work for TV or for radio or for print. Or maybe more digitally focused. But for us, any given 30-second or 45-second story that you see on TV often takes many, many, many more minutes or even hours to put together, simply because we have to dispatch our photographers and our reporters, and they have to go out and get the video, and then it has to be written into a script. That script has to be approved. The video then has to be edited to match, and then that all has to be synced up with graphics and choreographed studio. So it's one of those things where if you can understand our workflow, and timing is key when you pitch a story and understanding how we're going to be able to cover it, we're better able to do a story that probably is one that you like. So I think the key with that, when you send a press release, a big thing I noticed, and this goes for all walks of life, people will send press releases to organizations. You should be, make some time available immediately after you send it. If you sent it at the beginning of the day or around noon or something, like have someone who's by the phone and ready to pick up if we have a follow-up question. I think oftentimes people will fire it off and they either won't include email, a phone number rather, or they won't have anyone who's available to take the question. So for us, logistically, as we divide up our finite resources, we're probably going to skip over that one. Like, they're not around, we got to move on. The other thing that's really key when pitching a key story specifically for us is the visual is everything. We need video, if you have something to provide ahead of time, that's great to pique our interest. Or if it looks visually very amazing, or you've got an interesting angle and backstory that goes with it, all of those elements that you include are likely to make us want to cover the story more. And in addition to that, I can't tell you how many people have sent a story. We've called them on the phone. They say, great, see you in a few minutes. And then we get and they're surprised and horrified to see that we brought a camera. And, we're a TV station, and it surprises me still that people will not understand that piece of it. So you have to have not only a good story and a good video in mind for us, but you have to have people who are willing to go on camera. For radio, you have to have someone who's willing to, be mic'd up, and people have to talk. Stories are really people focused, especially if we're talking about art. You have to be, if you're really, really shy, practice a few times before we come out to talk to you. We try to make it as conversational as possible, and we try to remind people, it's really pressure. We're going to try the best part of what you say, but we want it to be authentic. So, don't hide when the camera shows up. In terms of pitch stories to a TV station, I think it's a little bit similar to what was described to timing is key. Our morning meeting, when it comes to our evening shows, and so the planning process is around 9. So if you send the press release a little bit before that, that gives the reporters who are frantically searching for their stories of the day some time. If you send it around 7 or 8 a.m., there's likely going to be a reporter who sees it, and if it's something that they feel like this could be something that could cover today, then they will also pitch that in the meeting. Our management may also pitch it. And then that's discussed. If you sent it at 4:50 p.m. right before our evening newscast, it will not be seen, or it's going to get thrown in a pile for later. That's really key. Phone calls, we don't necessarily discourage. However, it really plays into this element of timing. If you call again at 4:30 as we're ramping up to our newscast, or if you call at 2:30 to tell us about an event at 5, and we are very unlikely, or we're unlikely to go cover because our resources were already designated, and we're unlikely to break from that pattern unless there's news, unless there's something really big that was unexpected. So if it's something that you can plan ahead of time, whether it's a visual event or if it's something that you think it would be of interest to us, giving us that extra day of time is helpful. And knowing also that process. If we're ramping up to a newscast, we're not going to be able to divert. Looking at my notes here, I'm just trying to think if there's any other things that weren't already touched on. I think when it comes to the kind of story, along similar lines that I mentioned earlier, we will often ask what sort of community difference does this story make? What's going to have people talking about this the next day, or what's going to have someone want to share this story with a friend, whether that's online, whether that's a Vermonter who's no longer living in the city, or if that's their coworker, the next day, like I saw this great person on the news, or something along those lines. We really have to ask those questions. It comes down to, why care? Why are people going to want to see and share this? And also, it's a story different. Like I think it was mentioned, what makes news? What makes it something that we haven't seen before? What makes this exclusive? It might sound a little bit cliche, but news organizations do like to have content that is unique to them. If you turn on any given newscast target, we have a lot of the same stories if it's the news of the day. So we like to have something that gives them incentives to tune in and say, oh, I tuned in today because this story was different and it was interesting to me. I know really quick, one note in terms of sending photos and videos. I know that in the digital age, everyone is shooting vertically, and that's great for social media. The algorithms work much better for that there. But on media, as you notice, and even probably on the screen that you're seeing me, we are 6:9. So you got to turn your phone horizontally if you want us to use your video or your pictures. We can use vertical video, but we always tell people horizontal, and we still get more vertical horizontal all the time. And I think repeating something that was said earlier, so don't be offended if your story gets cut last minute or if it's held. If something big happens, we have very finite resources. It takes a lot of work to get our product on the air, all of the graphics and the video and the writing, and making sure that we're standing in the right place and smiling while doing it. When the whole world is falling apart, sometimes stories don't make the cut. So we like to use content. If it gets cut, we like to go back and try to find a place to use it. But just understand that that's the nature of the business. I think for all of us, if something big were to happen, sometimes stuff can't make it into that issue or that newscast. If there's questions down the line, I'm happy to answer them. I think a lot of what I would have said has been said already, so thank you.
So we'll turn it over to you guys. And what questions you have?
I have a question for the gentleman on the screen. You two people were willing enough to tell us what not to do, and I didn't hear anything from you about a definite not to do thing. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
So I'm having a bit of a hard time hearing the question. Are you asking me what to do or what you should not do?
Shouldn't do. If you have any, right out of the gate, never do this.
Anything, not to.
Nothing. Well, I've done every job under the sun when it comes to TV. So I've been the producer behind the scenes. I've been the person who makes the video. I write a lot of my own stuff. I also edit a lot of the things. The news anchor now, I'm doing combinations of all of those things. So for me personally, the biggest way to turn me off of the story is for someone to call me up and they almost feel like they own you a little bit because they've seen TV. And you did a story like this that one time, And oftentimes I, am involved, but I didn't necessarily pick and choose all the stories of the day, especially because I came in halfway through. So I think just that sense of entitlement that Pamela mentioned, it's really important in your tone of pitching the story. Kind of a two-way street. You're helping us out with content, but also be obligated. So I think that tone is really key. In terms of song dues for pitching a story to TV, I would say calling to not just try to speak to the first person who answers the phone. Often that is a producer or even one of us anchors in the middle of 16 others. So I would recommend almost first thing you call and you get someone on the other end saying, I'd like to pitch a story. Is the assignment editor there? Can I talk to them? Assignment or assignment manager is what we call it in TV. I don't know if it's similar in other media. But that person is specifically designated, taking down story ideas. They often are the ones that comb through all of our emails that we make, because we have 90,000 of them in our inbox. So yeah, I think that would be one of the strongest things I would say. And if you don't hear back, you can follow up, but just politely, follow up and ask, is this something that you might cover? And we may have a yes or no. Because we try to be as transparent as possible. If it's something that doesn't sound like a news story that we can cover, usually we'll try to be upfront with that.
Thank you.
The same one. I'm just wondering if there's value in the uber formal press release versus I've had luck with the formal release, but I feel like I've had more luck with just sending an email to a writer who I know what they cover, and I'm like, hey, there's this thing happening. Here are the critical details you need to know, but it's not this like paragraph with two pull quotes and and I'm just wondering if you can tell a little bit about that, like what works for you with both, or if one doesn't work.
I can speak to that. I think it doesn't matter if it's a formal press release. You might waste a lot of time, really formal. But I would say the same rules apply that I mentioned before. It's like put all the important stuff at the top, make sure there's a contact number, make sure we can get to the point right away so we know, oh, this is what that's about. I do want to talk to this person. If you have to dig for it, and I'm going to put it aside and maybe get to it later. But usually with email, it just sinks to the bottom, very deep pool. So I don't really care, formal release or not.
I would say as long as it includes the essential information, concise, clear, you've already got an angle in mind. We may choose a different angle, but if you already have an idea to pique people's interest, if you have photos, that's really helpful. I would say in terms of a formal press release, you need it to be formal. It just needs to be complete. So make sure you have a phone number. Otherwise, we're likely going to move on because it's a big waste of time to try to chat with someone through email. And then the other thing that Pamela also mentioned earlier, never attach it as an attachment and have the email be blank or see a test release. That's the worst. Please have it be in the body of the email so we can read it right then.
Nitty-gritty of emails, subject lines. I think we probably feel pressure when we write this sweet email and then we get to something we're like, do we try to hook them there, or do we just keep it very blunt, or like, what's your preference?
I would say subject line it's all about the subject line with so many.
No pressure though.
Yeah, no pressure. Just with so many emails coming in for all of us, it sounds, we're getting bombarded today. It's just a personal preference, but that's usually what gets me to read through. Especially if it's whatever cool angle, like Nealon just said. We might not use that angle that you've created or thought about, but it's probably a really good way to pique interest.
I would say again, to say what the thing is, the subject, what subject. Don't try to be coy or clever. Just that's what it's about. And if the editor or whoever is interested in that, they'll want to read on. But it has to be the most brilliant prose you've ever come up with. You know,
I also think including the local tie is really
Yeah.
important because we get so many national spam emails all the time of, we got this like interview available for Black Friday or, national press release. Vermont is rated the top whatever in the country and they're often really facts. So a lot of those emails get thrown right into spam. So if you can put authentic local connection that shows that, oh, this is from someone that's in our community, great.
Can you talk a little bit about places where you learn about stories that aren't us reaching out to you? So, for example, I had a calendar listing in 7 days, reporters interested and they've reached out. Or I know Instagram has spurred some stories. So, what else can we be doing for you to notice us?
well, I think I all see the same things that you guys do. I'm not necessarily getting stories on Instagram. I'm getting food porn and puppies and stuff, but sometimes I'll find out about an artist via Instagram and might check them out if they're local. But, also media, Twitter, Facebook, and your calendar, the ads. I look at, after editing the entire paper, I then look at the paper for the ads. And sometimes they're really informative. And posters around town, word of mouth, everything. Now, you never know where it's going to come from. But a lot of it is stuff that's intentionally sent to us.
I have a question. So if you were to move to a new city you've never been to before and you wanted to assemble a press list, how would you do that? If it was you?
We have a media list. I don't know if that is somewhere. That's an interesting question. Like if you're and you want to know who to send stuff to. You can see what the papers are and listen to the radio stations and figure it out. And obviously, Mr. Google is helpful. But in terms of finding an actual press list, maybe Vermont Press Association or whatever the state is, might be useful. If somebody queried me and said, hey, do you have a media list? I'd probably just email it to them. But I don't know if that formally exists out somewhere.
I would just, if I was just moving into a committee, the small local papers, I would definitely reach out to them first. A lot of them also exist on, they do still have print issues, but, they're sort of create those two worlds. And again, always looking for content that's community-based, just like we all are. But they might have more availability some weeks more than others, but that would be my, my advice. Those small local papers are really they're in your community and they're really invested in hyper local stories.
That reminds me of something I forgot to tell you not to do.
What not to do?
I have so many of those. And, because you said hyper-local, I think this is true of local TV and radio as well, but it's a 7 days mission to cover Vermont. And it's not that we're not interested, but we really have to draw the line somewhere. So if you've just come back from this fabulous tour of South America and you want to tell us about it, I would have to say no. So if it didn't happen in Vermont, we just do it. So, don't bother going to South America.
Cancel that trip.
Got one in the back there.
I have a question about exclusivity, especially maybe for Galen. What is the impact of going to cover a story and finding the other news outlets are there? Because the person contacted all the news outlets. Does it have any impact on how you feel about the situation when you get there? And does it have any impact on any follow-up to that story?
I think the key with that is you don't promise us exclusive and then have it not be. I mean, I covered plenty of stories before where other outlets are there, and that's totally fine and expected. And we're sort of in this together. We are sort of competition, but at the end of the day, I understand, like, if a story is a story, it's a story. But if it's one that's a little bit unique and that you want somewhat focused coverage on first, if you promise exclusive, we hope that you would, that you'd be transparent about it if the media picked up on it. Hey, just a heads up to you, because we often in our promotions department will be promoting something as if, whether that's on social media or giving people an incentive to tune in. So that sort of loses its oomph, and then it makes us look dishonest if all of it's not. So I guess, does that answer your question?
I think so.
Is there anything special you look for in images that are provided to you, whether it's art or banners? Or anything that makes the picture more compelling for print? And that question could translate to other media too. Mary, I know you mentioned that there should be an audio component because it's radio, duh. But if there's a way to describe especially compelling or how to convey that, I'm curious.
VPR does have a dedicated digital department, and they're the ones turning those web posts for not just the news stories, but all features and longer form audio. And I think they're always looking, obviously, for high quality photos to put on the website. But I should have done a little research into what exactly they're looking for. Are you talking about like what grabs them, or are you talking about what size the photos should be, or more technical, or?
Well, this question ultimately would for each of you, but are there minimal standards, and on top of that, what make you feel like it's adding value, or it's a great photo you really want, that kind of thing?
I can say that when I choose those for my own stories and send it to the digital folks, I always change the photo. So I'm probably not the best person to judge photo art. For some reason, I'm not at the visual aspect of, because I'm so into like the broadcast world and have been for so long that for me to have translate visually on a web post is, thank God, not my department. Some professional, awesome folks who get to do that. So I can certainly find out more about that and share that. Like, what are they looking for? I think that'd be helpful for everybody to know when they're pitching.
I'm curious as much about translating that question about photos, which I think there's a chance Pamela has to say, and transfer it to audio content. It's one thing to say there will be noise, but it's another to talk to you and tell you something about that noise that will make you get excited about it.
Yeah.
That's what I wonder, like, how would they convey that to you, or how would they talk about it, or what kind of photos would Pamela, and what kind of video, would Galen be interested in? Like, if they to hype or highlight the usefulness of a story with these, extra media content.
I could say some kind of practical things about that. I think that, we've all got smartphones now, and they actually have not bad cameras in them. And if you take an iPhone photo, be sure to send a horizontal, as Galen mentioned, because actually online and like in e-newsletters, that format demands that we horizontal photos in. It's kind of annoying, but there it is. So if you send this beautiful full-length picture of yourself, we'll have to crop it. So, we'll decide whether we want your feet or your head, but, but I think if people take their own photos, the iPhone can actually be perfectly fine. But when you send it to somebody, send it at the highest possible size. And probably the easiest thing is just actual size. And those are usually pretty good. But I'm really surprised at the number of teeny tiny little photos that we get that are fine for online, like the calendar listings or something, but they're not big enough for print. So I spend a lot of time emailing and saying, could you send me a bigger photo of this? You know, especially visual artists. I'm kind of shocked at how bad the images are that people send sometimes. Band photos are usually better. You know, it's not that they're better photographers, but maybe they just take more time to compose them or something. But if you are a visual artist and you want to send in your work, it's so much to have like an individual, like here's the painting. I don't want to see the wall around that painting, just the painting. The more direct, the better. You know, if the photos are going to be small, which they usually kind of are in a newswork, make the people bigger. Don't give us a whole room. You see, you know, when everybody goes to a press conference and everybody's taking the same image from across the room of this at the podium, there is no way to make that interesting unless you get up close. Most of you are not doing that, but it's just an example of, you know, how you can make your image immediate as the passion you have for that subject.
I think for TV, I always just try to think of it of what's something that would capture someone's attention. TV, or I think like many other media, competing with so many other things these days. So we expect someone to be watching our newscast to also be on their phone like this the whole time. So they're not necessarily watching or even really listening all the time. You have to have reasons, you know, good sound and good visuals to go with a story to make someone go, wait, what was that? Because I think our natural instinct on social media is we're scrolling, wait, what's that? And then you scroll back. And it's sort of that same mentality. And obviously it's subjective, art is subjective, content is subjective. So that capturing moment or capturing sound may be different for different people. But if for you, you're looking at a photo and you're like, I don't know if that's very interesting, then it maybe will feel that way to other people. So, you know, try to be creative with it, try to find ways to, you know, grab someone's attention to say, I want to get a look at that.
Thank you.
Real quick, just from like a musician standpoint, kind of a two-part question. What usually bothers you guys the most from a musician? Like an album release, a tour, something like that. And then another question was just what kind of are the exciting stories that you have covered from a musician?
Oh, Lord. I want to take that one.
Let me answer the first part first. Yeah, album release. I think that those can be compelling. I think at VPR at least, it's different now where a few years ago with the Art Hounds segment, you know, we needed content each week to fill a segment. Now the is to have art be throughout news magazines, throughout Vermont Edition at noon, a call-in show, throughout podcasts or short series, just so it's part of the entire package. It's not just relegated to this 4 minutes on Twitter. And that's, it's going to be so subjective to, you know, is the morning show host going to find your that you're releasing as compelling as the afternoon host? Again, I think that a record release is awesome. Probably it took years and years of dedication and sweat and tears. But what is it going to do for the person on the other end of the speaker? You know, is it going to move them to hopefully buy your record, or, you know, what's that outcome? If you can share that, like, that'll grab somebody at VPR to reach out and be like, tell me about this. I think it's helpful in terms of audio itself. It's better to have, even if it's a small clip of a song, it doesn't have to be the whole album, doesn't have to. I always get super nervous when people say that it's not released yet, but they've sent you the whole album and all the tracks on it. It's like, I feel like I'm, you know, it's too much responsibility for me not to like somehow lose it or send it to the wrong thing. So just a tiny bit of a track and then why it's compelling and why it's going to move somebody to do something after they hear it. What's the second part of your question?
Just like what, like a benefit or something that was like really exciting that you
Yeah.
definitely wanted to.
There was a local band that was doing this like do good work recently. What's the name of that band? You guys remember?
Zookeepers?
Oh, the Zookeepers did the library thing. That was cool too. Yeah. That was but yeah, the bands that were doing some others. I'll remember the name in a sec, but it was. Yeah. GOT. Yeah, Gang Up. Yeah, GOT. Yeah. And all along their tour, they'd stop. They'd have the community who needs help doing what. They'd go to, volunteer somewhere for a day, help build a house or lunch at the local shelter. And they made it part of their media campaign. They made it online. I don't know. That was just really compelling because there was more to it than just we're going to stand on stage at night, big crowd, everybody loves it, and they go back home. Something like that.
I think that's especially true for TV. If we're going to cover something like that, I feel like we don't cover as much art and music as we should and could, but it comes down to that angle and, how much are we going to invest in a story that people might see as light, when, at the end of the day, maybe there's a deeper thing to beyond the music, there's a community difference being made, or there's something really being done. If it affects a lot more people outside just a single musician or band, then I think that broadens that appeal a lot. The other piece of it, at least, I don't know, maybe this is similar for other platforms as well, but I've worked for the TV station where a band it was a national group, but one of the boys in it was from that market, a previous station I worked for. And so, do the story with him, talk about the music, do all this stuff. And then they tried to do my station for playing a clip of the song. So we got out of that pretty easily because they didn't really have grounds for it. But I think especially these days, and my current company, TV over WCAX, is very strict about what we can run and permission to use. So you have to, as a musician, be willing to say, you can use everything that you filmed here and the music that we review, and we're not going to go sell it online or, spoil or whatever, but, if we have permission to use the stuff that we are going to broadcast for copyright.
Yeah.
I would say that you should be friends with Jordan Adams, the music editor at 7 Days. We publish 2 CDs every week. And have 3 spotlights and a feature musician or a band every week. So there are a number of places just in print where band get coverage. And now all platforms can do all the things. I mean, they'll have print on their website, and we can do audio, do a lot, but we do some, and put bits of film clips and things like that, or video on our website too, and on our blog posts. So, I mean, there are a lot of different ways where you can get some coverage, like going sort of at the top of this. But also know that there are a lot of bands around here, and there's a lot of competition for getting the ear of whoever you want to listen to it. So, I mean, I agree. If you have something unique to say, or your band is doing something unusual, definitely, kind of hype that. But just know that if you're a band of a new product, we're going to really try to get to that too. It doesn't, have to have a lot of bells and whistles beyond that too.
I think you'll enjoy this. I'm friends with Jordan Adams, and I asked him one time, I was like, Jordan, what do you like in a music email? He was like, I'll tell you what I hate.
He's like me.
He goes, I hate a story.
Oh, no.
He says, stop telling me your stories. Just give me the music.
Yeah.
But I guess like the medium is, like you said, put everything important up front.
Yeah.
If you want to put a stuff after it so Jordan doesn't have to read it. You can do that.
Well, I kind of where it's coming from, because a lot of music writing, people know that they're competing with so many other bands, and they try to make up often apocryphal story about their band. And it might be entertaining for a minute, but if you get 50 of them a day, you're like, oh, for God's sake, just get to it. So I know where he's coming from because that's his focus. It wouldn't be mine. I want to know more story. You know, it's different when your main job is reviewing than and doing
More about the content.
doing a Q&A, then you're looking to be more of a storyteller. And you know, there's breaking news, which TV in particular is doing and the newscasts are doing, but also what all of us are doing really is storytelling. And we have all different ways of trying to make it work.
How far out in advance is too far out in advance? So I know my premiere is 6 months or a year and a half before it happens. Year and a half is probably too long, but I don't know where.
I'd have to agree with that. Again, it depends on the medium, but I would observe the calendar deadlines. And if you want to get, if you think your project is really cool and makes a story, for me, I would say a month or but not a year, not 6 months, it might be lost. I mean, it's okay if you give somebody a heads up and say, hey, next year I'm going to do this thing, and then a little bit closer to time, send a reminder. But yeah, I mean, mostly 2 to 6 weeks out, I think would be good.
For TV, I'd say it's a little shorter just because our deadline is a week and we reset, we hit reset the next day. So probably a few days, a week.
Yeah, I think maybe radio is somewhere kind of in between that. Like, I actually appreciate hearing from artists who do have a project in their sites that's 6 months to a year down the road. I save those emails in a folder, and then inevitably they're going to follow up like, hey, we just got a grant for this, and now this phase. There are a couple of those that I'm actually following now, and it's sort of, you can almost champion those, a little more, because you're like, oh, it's been 2 years. Is this play ever going to happen? So when, I think as you get closer, then maybe a month out, send that, not formal, but send that email or press release or whatever.
And I think if you're working with a specific reporter, anchor, editor, maintaining that relationship without, bogging them down with spam, I think it's good. You can say, a few months before, we don't just delete it, but we always appreciate the follow-up.
I just want to sort of confirm something I feel like I'm hearing in this discussion, which is that, as artists, we're trying to think about the press in relation to an event that we're doing, or wanting attention towards that particular moment. And it seems like, when it comes to reviews or criticism, that's on its face. But if it's about being the story, it's about kind of repositioning your thinking to not just the event and the art itself, but what's happening down and outside of that piece of art that's kind of reaching in the community or is different. And so is that sort of, I thought it was interesting in his question about the music, but whether it's theater or visual art, but how are you touching the community? It's just the art in itself.
What was the question?
You want to be the story that it's, it can't just be about promoting what you're doing, but your event has to somehow be reaching into the community in a broader sense, or so there's something more interesting happening than just you doing your music as you always do, or doing your theater as you always do, but what's different and unique about this particular event?
I think that's key in sort of selling any product, whether that's art or, news. I think, you have to have something that's compelling that people want to be a part of. So I think having that relevancy, having that connection to the community and a different viewpoint of it beyond just, I recorded a song or I painted, or, having something behind it that resonates with people, I think is what creates that. I can't just assume like, well, I'm on TV, therefore people think I'm important. Like, but some people don't care. So at the end of the day, like, you have to have good content, and I think that applies to all of them.
I mean, sometimes an event is just a hook. It's a time hook. Now, we usually like having a time hook for something or some kind of hook. It has to be relevant. Again, it's a newspaper. It's a newscast. There has to be something sort of timely about it. No, we don't sometimes do sort of history-based stories, but yeah, I think an event can just be a jumping-off point.
Yeah, recently VPR did a series on young artists working in the States. And that was really, I don't even know any of them were event-based. The artists that we spoke with, they may have had something coming up, but really it was just mostly how do you survive as a working artist and telling their story of what does that look like day to day in the state. So stories like that, I think, they also have more longevity too. Can be played in more locations. Perhaps also on the web with audio attached to it, like a podcast version. It just has more if it's not. This event is happening, and I'm going to be there and see my art. But those are okay too. It's just maybe it has more longevity if it's not only event-based.
I'm curious about what people here are here for. I mean, what kind of stories do you want to tell? Yeah.
I'm a recycle artist. There's a lot of us out these days, and I just moved to Burlington, and I have a new game where I harvest pieces to recycle, and I have a different concept. So I'm here because I'm just really curious. How do you go about that? I'm from Montpelier, not that far away, but might as well be a million miles away as far as what I see here. This is wonderful. So
This
much
is Burlington. These are Burlington people.
Yeah.
And one in Portland, Oregon, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've Larry, and I wanted to just hear what you had to say. I wanted to hear about things that I'm doing, maybe some of the things I'm doing wrong. I also need to hear how the different media with each other and how one thing means something to users where TV is a whole different kind of thing. And because I'm involved with being myself in a lot of different ways, I found it fascinating just to listen to what you had to share.
Good.
So I came because I'm interested in thing. I sing barbershop with the Green Mountain Chorus, which is a barbershop chorus. And one of the things we deal with as an organization is, when you think about barbershop, you think of 4 white guys. And, quartet of 4 white guys. And that's changing. We're getting a lot of new, the popularity of acapella singing is increasing. It's tremendous, and yet we struggle to get young men into our chorus. And so I'm here to figure out people don't even know we exist. We've been singing in the Burlington area for 75 years. We're with Burlington Jazz Barbershop Artist Site. We have a compelling story too, because we do more than sing. A lot of work in the community. We do a lot of work with COTS, helping raise funds. We do a lot of Lono singing for other charities, and we do a horrible job of getting this message out.
For radio.
Yeah, absolutely. Smashing stereotype. 4 old white guys at a time.
We have decided to admit when it's an official thing. It's part of this year.
Oh, see, that's a story.
My name's Mike. I'm actually one of the members of the Circus Collective here in Burlington, and also the Burlington Burn Club, which happened the third Thursday at Battery Street Park for the past few months ended our season. And I'm here because none of the members could actually make it tonight. So I'm kind of like representing them, trying to net it. Yeah, we've been an active part of the community for the better part of 5 years. It's like the Circus Collective, being part of like the farm market, juggling, teaching people there, like little kids, older adults too, entire range. And now we just meet up every Friday at the Aikido Dojo on Pine Street. We rent out that space to encourage people to come out and learn about circus art. And, so really, this is just another opportunity for our collective network with more people.
Cool.
My name is Kyle. I'm a musician. Band is called Glorious Leader, or it's a solo act, really. And, yeah.
It's Kyle Glorious Leader.
We're all here. And, I moved up to Vermont 2 years ago in the South, and I've been touring for the past 10 years. And I started to think that as a musician, you feel this pressure to live in a city and network. And I was like, I kind of want to build a cabin in the woods. And I did that, and I'm kind of toying with these ideas to make it as like a small musician and actually make like an equitable living at it. And somehow that relates to Vermont.
And there are people doing that.
Yeah.
There's some good role models for that.
And while I'm here, my press emails have always sucked.
Because you were sending them to Jordan.
Yes.
That was
Too much story.
What about you?
Yeah.
Well, I'm here. I have information about Jordan actually. I have a new album and I sent it about a month ago. I've been waiting, but I was making sure I did the right thing by having a polite conversation and letting it sit. So that sounds like
Yeah. So you know, any other musicians in this room, there is such a backlog. Don't get discouraged. I mean, it's really, he's so it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
He's in books.
Yeah.
He did put out a columns to at the end of October, so that was when
There you
got a big flood of stuff. I actually had pretty good success on local radio and cable TV, telling my story as a new songwriter. But in this case, I was really curious about that.
Yeah, I'm here from Generator, and we have 500 members who are making things from water purification systems for families to jewelry. And then we have programs that are meant to launch artists and their, small businesses, and we have this all the time. We have classes, and there's kind of no end to the stories and things to talk about. I guess I'll ask another question. I'm wondering where craft lives, because there are a lot of crafts people in Vermont who kind of straddle our craft worlds. And I'm going to answer my own question. I assume it's just like any other story where there has to be something about it, right? Like, it can't just be like, I make maple benches, right? There has, is that accurate?
Depends on how good the maple benches are.
Well, for WCAX, we have a segment called In Vermont specifically. I think it airs on Mondays. Scott Fleischman does it. He's our weekend morning anchor, and he'll usually shoot during the week when he's able to in his schedule. And the whole premise is, cool stuff that someone's making in Vermont. I don't know his process in terms of vetting which things he chooses or doesn't choose, but he certainly is always open to ideas. So.
He's actually coming to Generator Week. So, yeah. But on that note, I'm glad you brought him up. He told me that he really struggles to get enough stories outside of Burlington. And so that's another question that I had for you all, which is that as media organizations are supposed to cover all of Vermont, but, based just a lot of things happen here. Are you often looking for more stories outside of Burlington?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite stories I've covered were outside of Burlington. Logistically, it's really challenging. So that's where you've got to really sell the visual reason for us to drive 2 hours to somewhere.
In the back there.
Yeah, not an art issue. I'm involved in a local politics, political issue, and so I was hoping to have a few fine tuning points on that. Any little tips for how to plug a political story?
That would be a news editor thing. That's not my bailiwick, but there are people at all of our platforms to talk to about.
We did a little musical spoof a while back, and that got picked up automatically. It seemed like the 7 Days picked it up, and the television picked it up also. So how is that something a little bit crazy and out of the ordinary? Does that really catch on?
Totally.
It worked.
Yeah. I love spoofs. How about some of you people who haven't talked? What are you here for? You're here because you have to be.
Partially, but now a new reason. I'm a junior at South Burlington High School, so this is kind of a future for me. I'm super interested in the arts. Journalism is on my list, and going to colleges, you start thinking about, what do you want with your future? The question that I kind of arose in my head when he was talking about politics is, how do you work with youth in Vermont and getting youth artists out? And I have a lot of friends in high school who maybe they're not adults, maybe they're not 30 and have their own platform really yet, but their art can be sung and at some point get to that role where it could have a form. How do you guys work with high schools and younger folks to broaden their horizon?
Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah. For instance, young classical musicians, there's a student composer showcase PR Classical does. It used to be more regular. Now it's more, it's a bit more scattered, but they do still take submission that. I think the process is exactly the same to story no matter what age. The only hurdle, or it's not even a hurdle, for VPR at least, we have to have your parents or guardians sign off to say, can we use an image, use audio, video, etc. And that's really only, you have to sign an agreement, or your folks have to sign it. But I would say VPR too, that's one of the groups of Vermonters that we haven't told enough of those stories. So those rise to the top, I would say. Compelling stories to tell about young artists.
Young writers.
Yeah, I think they're inherently appealing stories, yeah.
Yeah. We 7 Days is an alt weekly, and it's sort of 15+ paper, but we do some stuff with high school. We will not do though is review. That just doesn't seem fair, to hold kids to a professional standard. But we definitely have written some high school things, and we're not disinterested in that. But like everybody else, they have to let us know about it.
Yeah.
Hello, I am have an option of creating a festival, a dance festival in Waterloo Junction. And I've been thinking of it a lot, and we didn't grant, didn't receive the funds. But I'm still going on the idea, and I'm here to just gather information. And as far as some young people that are on the platform, this will be a great platform for young dancer artists. We're planning on doing that in summer of 2020. So I have about less than a year to like ducks.
Well, keep us posted. Keep us posted.
Sure.
You and your ducks.
Yes.
How about you? Where are you here?
I'm here presenting a small, very small and young theater company.
Theater company?
Yeah, theater cooperative is the term that we use because we like to make sure that it kind of
works together, because it's a very young company, so everybody has to do events.
Of course.
We make that an intentional part of the process. We had it last summer. We typically are doing full productions in the summertime, so we're coming up. And so I'm just here to like garner a lot of information and learn as much because we're very young and we're learning.
What's your name?
Falcon Hills Theater Cooperative. It's a quote from Shakespeare. Taming of the Shrew.
Nice. Anybody else? I don't know.
So, yeah, I'm a local pop artist. And really, you know, like kind of the question that I asked is one of the main reasons why I came today is just, you know, everyone's got an album, everyone's got a show, but what to do to kind of get the plug to make it an actual thing. I'm a solo artist right now, but my group, we're together 7 years, called the Linguistic Civilians, and we did a bunch of different stuff. A tour every November called Tossing Out Turkeys, where we do shows around, raise money for to buy to turkey before the holidays and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to get back into that aspect of it. So just gaining more information.
You guys got a lot of ink in 7 days over the years.
Yes, you know, and I don't have a relationship with Jordan as I did with Dan. So trying to.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. Please meet us afterward in the whiskey room if you want to hang out. And thank you to Burlington Arts for the space.
So if you happen to be a musician, make an original music, let them have a conversation with you. Stand at the table, join us on a radio show.
Yeah, I probably have
Thank you both so much.
Right. So, yeah, I know.
It was probably just one of the spotlights.
We are in Burlington, kind of. We did a show. We were like 2 Yeah, right now it's looking like we're getting which is not our typical repertoire, but we're also doing
You're Julie? Hi, Rick.
I
Nice
just
to
wanted
see you. How are you?
So you're trying to
Nice to see you, because I thought you were in Vermont.
well, you're supposed to go
Yes, most of us are. They're currently being
well, you know, check out Awesome. Great to meet you. And good luck to you guys.
Yeah, I know. That's why she wants me to do There's so much happening. That was a lot last week.